Two of my favorite people, probably two of my favorite professional healthcare people that every time I run into them, they make me smile and they teach me something new. And that is what I want to tell you if you're a physician listening this July 12 and 13 here in Atlanta. Dr. Ellie Campbell and Natalie Raschuti from Revolution Practice are hosting an educational event here in Atlanta that is for doctors and for your office managers and for your team members. I would encourage all of your team members to attend as well. Like office managers, practice administrators, you need what they have to learn, what they have to share. You need to know it. And I've had the pleasure of knowing these two ladies, and they've got some other amazing speakers coming as well. July 12 and 13. You can go to revolutionpractice.com to learn more, but they're going to talk about practice building tips. And I know that's kind of a general word, but we all need to own our schedule these days, and we need to know about business. I was talking with one doctor, he's a concierge doctor, and he said, if we want to be good at business, we have to know business. And that's exactly what Natalie and Dr. Ellie Campbell are going to be teaching at Revolution Practice this July 12 and 13. They're going to go over some functional medicine tidbits. They're going to talk to you about profits and loss sheets. They're going to talk to you about HR do's and don'ts. I know that you and your team will enjoy what they have to share. Go to revolutionpractice.com. But before you do, don't take my word for it, because I'm just a nobody. I want you to hear it directly from them about what great things they have in store for doctors and for your team and you. Go to revolutionpractice.com, but don't go away yet. Here's the interview with Natalie about all the details.
Doctors need to be reminded that they are creating an experience in healthcare, not just a treatment plan, right? And that experience is what is going to linger with that person and their family and their children and their children's children, because those are the stories that get passed down. If you're not creating memorable stories of healing, and healing can take place on multiple levels, but it starts with the moment they pull into your facility parking lot. How do you create it from that moment until they're walking out the door to make them want to come back? And it's all about creating that experience for them. So what is involved in that experience? And that is one thing that Revolution Practice teaches you, because you're creating relationships, not treatment plans, not care plans. You're creating relationships, and relationships will endure if you know how to nurture them, care for them, and make those people who have trusted you want to come back.
Well, good morning or good evening, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have a special guest from Revolution Practice. She is multi-talented. She's a practice manager. She's an office administrator. She's a co-founder. She's a co-owner. Natalie, thank you for being our guest today. I would attempt to do your last name, but just like Tatro, it's one of those things that on the back of you're always surprised when you receive magazines, because you're like, I never saw that spelling of my last name come across before. Well, thank you for being our guest, Natalie.
Cat lover extraordinaire. But yes, my last name is Raschuti.
So Natalie, you guys have at Revolution Practice. Tell us a little bit about Revolution Practice. You have a live event coming up, but also you are helping doctors be better doctors and be better office managers and lead their teams better. I think I was just writing a sentence for a media quote a few minutes ago, and for another engagement in it, I said, I think doctors and the leaders inside of medical offices can lead us as your patients better. So tell us about how you're doing that at Revolution Practice.
It started out, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Ellie Campbell and I worked very close together. I became her, actually, I forced my way into Campbell Family Medicine, which is our direct pay primary care practice here in Cumming. And we saw such a need in making our own transition to support doctors and support teams, because as we grew and built our own practice, we saw that physicians were getting burnout and teams were falling apart and staffing was an issue. And doctors, as much as they are brilliant, they don't really always know the back business of the practice. And so understanding all of that was overwhelming, and they didn't really get it, and therefore the teams didn't get it, and they didn't share missions. And so Dr. Campbell and I thought, there has to be a way to assemble everybody together, just like a puzzle, right? That it all fits beautifully, and that the outside edges are all built, and then you fill in the middle, right? Because if you try to do it the other way, those edges don't always come together and things fall apart and you might miss pieces and whatnot. And it works the same way in healthcare and in making practices work optimally and function and efficiency. So we decided that we would take what we have learned in doing what we do and bring it to the masses. It's important to understand, how do you bring the right people into what you do? Because the wrong puzzle piece isn't going to fit. And so it's important that you understand what kind of puzzle piece you need to make it fit and to make it beautifully fit and to make harmony and synchronicity and all of those things, right? And so that is what Revolution Practice really does, is teach the doctors not only how to be better doctors, because there's tips and tools and tricks that Dr. Campbell has learned along the way in functional medicine and integrative medicine that doctors need to know about, because it makes the patient experience better. But there's tips and tricks and tools that we've learned through building our own practice that make the patient experience better. Because that's all, I mean, that's the reason why we're all here in the first place, right? Is because we had a drive and a passion to serve others, to serve patients. And we can't do that if all the puzzle pieces aren't fitting together correctly. But where do you turn, Michael? Like, doctors and team members, they don't know. There's so many, if you Google out there, there's so much information out there that alone can be overwhelming. So it's good to know that you've got somebody who's been where they are, who's been at the bottom and worked their way up and built the practice. And so that's what Revolution Practice does.
So, this is pulling a thread of training and pulling a thread of education and the continuing education that many physicians can get. I remember talking with one doctor. We invited her to an event, and she said, well, you're not taking me to Jamaica or St. John or St. Thomas or anywhere fun, so I don't want to come to your conference. And it was like, okay, well, I get it. That's fun. But at the same time, medical associations, councils, advisory boards, they're not looking at adding HR curriculum, profits and losses curriculum to a lot of their events. And that's a big need. I mean, I've been to more than my fair share of medical offices that myself, my kids, my mother was not treated very nicely, very kindly. And if anywhere in our community we should be as patients respected and welcomed and feel like we're, in a safe place and in a place where, like, hey, I'm not an inconvenient obstacle. I'm over here. I'm still waiting, and you haven't given me any direction on if the doctor's even in to see me today. I may have to see a stranger and then do something embarrassing later.
Yeah.
So, where do doctors turn? Where can they turn? And this is not a conversation for those who don't know either of us or haven't, you know, unpacked these types of conversations before. That, hey, I don't want a non-clinician telling me how to practice medicine, because that's always a big stickler when you talk with physicians, right? And go to meetings
Right.
and events. But how and where are they turning to learn about HR? Because, like, you heard on the radio today, it said, hey, kids are not learning teenagers, 20 somethings, 30 somethings, even 40 somethings are saying, I wasn't equipped to balance a checkbook. Well, people, you know what I'm saying.
Oh,
The basic accountings. How do I register for a car loan? What do I need to know? Well, there's a lot of things doctors don't know. They're just kind of thrown out to the wolves. And hey, that person out front, they're your own worst enemy. They are not making a good impression with patients.
oh yeah.
So where do they turn, and why are they turning to Revolution Practice?
Actually, I love that. You said so much that I could comment on, but let's see if we can kind of rein it in here a little bit. You know, I think that you are absolutely right. There's something that you have said in a lot of your podcasts and a lot of your books and a lot of what you do is that the patient experience starts before they even walk in the door. Right. And doctors, whether you're part of a group or you're your own entity or facility, you have to sometimes stop and look at the way that the practices the patients are perceiving your practice. And that starts from walking in the door. How to, walking from the parking lot into the practice. And but where do you go? Revolution Practice teaches you how to ghost your practice, how to look at it from a patient experience, how to create, like we do. We have a reception room, not a waiting room. Patients don't want to wait, and they shouldn't. They really shouldn't. And I think I emailed you recently about the fact that the new statistics show that sick patients aren't even being seen by their primary care doctors. Where are they supposed to go? Well, that is why the urgent care centers and the ERs are now so completely overwhelmed, and why we now have a problem with those people experiencing burnout. But if you don't take ownership of where you are in your career and what experience you're providing to the people that you're claiming to serve and love, what are you doing? Right? And if you've lost your passion and your purpose, that's okay. But don't lose it forever. Find a way to bring it back. Right. And that's what we do at Revolution Practice is we teach you, how do you look at your numbers? What are you looking for? How do you source your community? How do you find the community partners that help you? Like we did with our website, right? That's turned into more than just somebody who helped us build our new website and relaunch for this year. It's been a great partnership that's led to new patients in our practice, because people need you. People need to know that you exist. But if you don't believe in yourself, how are they going to believe in what you have to offer? Right. And so it starts with that. And so we teach you the whys. We teach you how to reignite that passion, but do it in a way that feels like it's honoring you as the schooling and education that you got, and as the what you've been through and your life experiences, and all of these components that make your practice about your purpose and your passion.
Well, I think it was Jeff Henderson. He's an author and a public speaker. And he says, when you have a heart for your community, you don't have to compete on price.
That's right.
Without community, you're a commodity. And I will say that from a parent perspective, I'm not a physician, but I am a patient. So I know what it's like to sit on the other side of the exam room, the service window, and wait in those waiting rooms and, read the all cap signs screaming at me to pay my bill. Or, hey, if you're late on your payments, we're going to come after you for $21. True story. Um, I think that organizations they don't stop innovating. People do. And that's where physicians can give up on fairness. And I think they need to get engaged. So, how do you want them to get engaged, not only with Revolution Practice, but also engaged with the ideas of, how to hire better people, how to evaluate performance standards. And, it's one thing to hire someone and then, hey, I know it's your first week, but we're also going to ask you to do this. I know it wasn't in your job description, but 6 months later, they're being evaluated on the job description and bullet points, but they're like, I didn't have time to do any of those things. Like, you didn't hire me for that. You put me over here. And, I think that you're talking about so many wonderful things at your upcoming live event. And I think it's this July 12 and 13 here in Atlanta, a suburb called Cumming, Georgia. You are going to be talking about HR do's and don'ts, practice building tips, owning your schedule. There's so much to unpack there.
Yes, there is.
Understanding your P and L's. I would say you'll probably also talk about minding your P's and Q's. Functional
Really?
medicine tidbits, how to deal with difficult people, and so much more. Tell us about what you're looking forward to teaching at this event coming this July 12 and 13, 2024 in Atlanta.
So what I love about these live events is that we have a schedule. You plan, right? These live events are planned out, but the attendees really dictate where we go with the content. So when we get a room full of people and they're all struggling with the same thing, we'll gear it to more, or we'll gear, I guess, or veer toward that. But we're programmed, right? So when you're in the field of medicine and you're in the admin position, you're programmed. You have a patient that doesn't pay their bill. Well, you send them the letter or the triple threat, and then they go to collections and blah 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 blah. But maybe that's not the best way. Well, what is the best way? So we look at that. When it comes to hiring, right? Everybody goes to, well, you got to do Indeed and just send out the resumes, or you collect the resumes. Well, maybe that's not the best way to find your puzzle piece that's going to fit. Well, how do you find that person? Well, we give you tips and tricks for that. We look at your P&Ls. What is a P&L? A lot of doctors, Michael, you wouldn't even know. Like they don't even know what their P&Ls are. They have no idea how much that an IV costs before the patient goes to the checkout. Like they don't know. Let us help you with that. What about, just making sure? I mean, personalities in a practice are everything. And you have a wide variety of personalities, patient personalities, physician personalities, staffing personalities, right? How do all those mesh together to make that puzzle work? Well, if you understand what you're looking for and you understand your mission and you understand your community, those puzzle pieces come together and fit better, and you know what you need in order to make that practice successful. So those are all things. What about firing people? Oh, right? It's such a scary topic, but it doesn't have to be if you know what steps to take. So we teach all of that in this event. And then we throw in all these really cool medical tidbits, right? We have a guest speaker coming in July that's going to talk to us about things to look at for cancer, right? Because cancer is growing. It's a terrible, unfortunate disease that is ravaging people, and we need to know what to look for. And so we have a guest speaker that will be talking about that, about things that kind of give you the little keyhole into the room and what do you look for. So that's exciting. We have functional medicine tidbits. Like there's doctors who want to put their toes in the water, but they don't know how. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Dr. Campbell's oral systemic connection expertise, and how do you make that link to improve the patient experience, as well as business management. So it's going to be an amazing 2 days. I cannot wait, because this is everything that all the doctors and all the team members emailed us about, saying this is what we want you to create. So we've done it. We listened and we've done it. And then we can teach them how to make their practice better in the long run.
And for those who are, I know a lot of physicians and office managers who may be listening, there's always something to learn when you go to an event. And there's always something that, you're enthusiastic about when you leave an event, and then you go back to the practice, you go back to your island all by yourself, and you tell your team members, like, here's what I learned. And they're like, whoa, hold your horses. We weren't there. You don't know what happened yesterday. And so you get dragged into the urgent. And we did a survey of patients, and we asked our patient readers who were actively seeking to try and find a new doctor. Like they just didn't like the one that they were at. They weren't getting treated very well. They weren't being, not from a clinical, well, probably from a clinical perspective as well. But we asked them and we polled them and we said, hey, if your doctor disappeared tomorrow, like closed up shop, emptied out the building and left, how much or how little would you actually care? And more than 8 out of every 10 patients said, it really wouldn't matter anyway. And so patients are customers, and there's a lot of things that you're probably going to learn at this event and all other types of medical association events that talk about these types of things that aren't talking about how, hey, brands disappear because in medical practices disappear because they think you don't care about them. They're going to actively vote with their wallets and vote with their feet. And guess what? We all have a little keyboard and computer in our back pockets that will leave a review that will probably sting you for 15 years, right?
Right.
And when personable leads to remarkable, remarkable will lead to memorable. What's one memorable thing that you want them to take with them from this July 12 and 13 event with Revolution Practice? And go to revolutionpractice.com.
So I think that doctors need to be reminded that they are creating an experience in healthcare, not just a treatment plan, right? And that experience is what is going to linger with that person and their family and their children and their children's children, because those are the stories that get passed down. If you're not creating memorable stories of healing, and healing can take place on multiple levels, but it starts with the moment they pull into your facility parking lot. How do you create it from that moment until they're walking out the door to make them want to come back? And it's all about creating that experience for them. So, what is involved in that experience? And that is one thing that Revolution Practice teaches you, because you're creating relationships, not treatment plans, not care plans. You're creating relationships, and relationships will endure if you know how to nurture them, care for them, and make those people who have trusted you want to come back.
Well, now we're going to move on to the lightning round of questions, and you can be however brief or long-winded as you would like to be on this. Um, you know, one of the questions we ask a lot is how important is gratitude for the customer? And how important is gratitude for the patient in the physician patient, but also the office staff to patient, because the doctor might only see that patient for, well, in a typical plan reimbursed, traditional practice model that most of us are familiar with and most of us have access to within 5-10 minutes of our practice right now, or of
Right.
our offices right now. That's what we're going to encounter. We may only spend a few minutes with the doctor, but we'll spend like 34 minutes with the office staff or in the office staff's presence. But we don't feel as a patient that we're like, oh, I'm sorry I'm here. I'm sorry I'm being treated today, needing to see the doctor, but you're treating me like I'm an inconvenience to
Right.
your schedule today, Mr. or Mrs. Office Manager. How important is gratitude?
I love that question. And gratitude and love and care are synonymous, right? So by your patients are the reason why you're there in the first place. And if you don't have the attitude of gratitude for the fact that they are the reason you come to work every day, you're going to lose sight of that. And if you lose sight of that, then you lose your passion and it becomes just a job. And when it becomes just a job, then you're not doing health care, right? And when you don't do health care, you don't do self care. And when you don't do self, it's a whole destructive pattern that unfolds, right? So gratitude really is important. And it goes on so many levels, because it doesn't just go from you as a physician to your patients, it goes around the office. Right. So as an office manager, I am constantly, I leave little notes on the keyboards of my team members. It's Monday, glad you're here today, right? Or I know that their favorite, like one of I went out and bought these are little V8 green drinks that just came out, and they're pretty healthy, but one of my team members loves them. So I sourced them. I found like a 6-pack and I went and I put them on her desk. And you would have thought that I gave her a $10,000 check, right? But it's those types of things, right? And when it comes to gratitude for your patients, you should be grateful that they're there, because they could go anywhere else, but they didn't. They chose you, and it's a choice thing. And as long as they're continuing to choose you, you are doing something right.
Yeah.
right?
And
And
you have to nurture that relationship, just like you're
absolutely.
nurturing that relationship with your staff. I think it was Elizabeth Dixon. She's a author and she's worked with brands, large brands that we've all heard of. And she said, you know, the customer experience is an overflow of the current employee experience. So if
100%.
that employee is being treated well by their bosses or their team members and their managers and supervisors, if they're being treated well, they're going to treat your customer well.
That's
And so
right.
I think that there's a space and a place in every medical office today where you can lead better. And it's not up to the doctor all the time. Like you probably know when to bring your doctor good news and bad news, right? Like you kind of
Absolutely.
know how to work that relationship. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things in a lot of medical offices that you and I have, probably visited. That is not being shared with the doctor. So they may not have any idea. And in many cases, the doctor isn't always the boss either. So, what's one tidbit that I don't want you to overshare because I want you to save something, save some things in the canon for your event. But what is one thing that you would tell physicians and office managers listening that are that you're going to talk more about how to deal with difficult people?
Well, that's another one of my favorite topics, right? So difficult people look for reasons to be difficult.
They make complaining a hobby.
Right. And they look, so when you know those people are on your schedule, I mean, you should do it anyway, but when you know those people are on your schedule, you take out the extra sparkly Michael Jackson glove, right? And you dust things off and you put on your best manners and you give them no wiggle room to be that. But you know what kills all that? Kindness. Kindness and gratitude. You said it. So it is hard to be angry, hostile, and complaining in the face of love, honor, respect, and gratitude. Those two don't go together well, right? They don't play together well. So if you can rise above what it is that they're trying to do, you can reach them at a whole different level. And who knows, you may raise their healthy deserve level, right? Because they do deserve the same care as everybody else. They're just a little more challenged to get there, but you can do it.
You're going to talk about a touchy subject, but I am always shocked by how much this is in the headlines. It happens quietly, and it's sad. It's frustrating. It's immoral. Um, and I'm sure it's illegal, right? And that is office theft. And I'm not talking about like, hey, I took a paper clip. And again, I don't want you to share the full story. But what is one thing doctors can do that they're going to learn about at this July 12 and 13 event here in Atlanta, Georgia, with Revolution Practice? And our guest today is Natalie, and she is with Revolution Practice, and they are hosting an event July 12 and 13. Go to revolutionpractice.com to register for the July 12 and 13 event. Is limited to 35 participants. But back on topic, reversing, office theft and embezzlement. And I want you to save something for the event, but maybe just what's one cue to be on the lookout for? Like, do I need to pay attention to my numbers? I don't want to be a micromanager, but how do what's a red flag that you're like, that's a little odd?
And that's actually another good point, Michael. And I hear that. That's what the doctors say. I don't want to be the micromanager. You don't have to be, but you still need to be a figure of authority. You need to know what your numbers are. If you know what your numbers are, then you'll know when they don't look right. And the other tidbit I can say to that is that even your most trusted employee has moments in life where they may not act in a way that resembles what you're used to. So if you don't know your numbers, if you don't know what how much you're spending on things, and you don't know your access points. So one of the things I do is I have every single employee keep a hit by a bus form, right? You know that. We laugh about that, right? If my employee goes out and gets hit by a bus, how am I going to get into what they were looking at? How do I do their job that they were doing or train the next person? Well, those things are build trust between you and your employees. But you have to know life happens and life can throw curveballs at anybody at any time, and they can make people act out of character. And you have to be on the lookout for that and recognize when that's happening and address those things as they happen, or you could be in for a big surprise, as we were, which we'll talk about that at the live event.
So our guest today is Natalie Raschuti, and I hope I pronounced that? Did I get
You
it right?
did.
All right. July 12 and 13, this July 12 and 13 in Atlanta, Georgia. You can go to revolutionpractice.com to learn more about what Revolution Practice is doing remotely and virtually, but also what they're doing in their live event. Because you guys have virtual stuff too. You're not just a one event, this summer kind of organization. You're training doctors virtually, talking with doctors every week.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we got from feedback was doctors wanted to pick our brains, and they wanted to do it in a way that was kind of a one-on-one, like what we're doing right now, because some of the questions that they have, they don't really want to admit that they have these questions. And so having these personal available consultations where they can go and find our calendar and they can book our time with us and pick our brains for the things that are forefront on their horizon, if you will, and pull apart that puzzle that they've got to figure out why the pieces aren't fitting. That was important. The other thing that we've added that we heard is I am doing practice evaluations. I'm calling it the pearls and pitfalls discovery, because doctors were like, hey, we want you. Well, you can't have me because I am definitely devoted to Campbell Family Medicine and Revolution Practice, but I can help you. And so they fly me out. I spend 3 days evaluating their practice, their staff, their management, how they order things, their processes, their operations. I'm there in case they want to hire somebody or fire somebody. I give them a full written evaluation of what I see and what needs to be changed and how I would change it. It's up to them to do it. And then I fly back home, and then they have the availability to connect with me in about 10 to 15 days after that to see how things are going and what has improved and what has changed and if they need any more help.
And what type of medical offices are you typically hearing from, working with? Is it a variety of specialties? Is it chiropractic? Is it family medicine? Is it all over the board?
It's actually all over the board. It kind of has surprised us. My background is chiropractic. That's how I got my start. So I always kind of have a soft spot for building the chiropractic office, but it goes way beyond that, right? So primary care physicians, psychiatrists, we've seen veterinarians. Veterinary practices have the same problems as primary care offices and other offices. Also, believe it or not, just small businesses, mom and pop businesses have contacted us because they want to know how we've done what we've done. And we have tips and tricks that help just small businesses. So it extends all over the healthcare platform. Spas, wellness spas is another one. We had a esthetician office that contacted us that we helped implement some practice changes. And so it's just kind of all over.
Well, I hear the buzzes. I've got a phone ringing and a light blinking. You've got dings and pings going on. So that leads us into the next lightning round question, and that is, with so many distractions and so many things coming at us all the time, what's one thing that they're going to learn related to owning their own schedule?
Owning your own schedule, it's how to take command and control, right? So it is what you create it to be. And if you want it to be chaotic or you don't control it, guess what you got? We always have, and everybody who knows us knows, we use that expression, you get what you tolerate. And it's the truth. And with your schedule, it's the same way. If you don't look at your schedule, own your schedule, it will own you. And then again, that starts that whole cascade of problems and issues and unhappiness and work-life imbalance, which is what we don't want.
And when you get small and personal, that is where your customers will demand that you grow bigger, right? I think that was a quote from the book, What to Do Next. Um, I'm seeing in more and more in the last few years that, you know, doctors want to continue doing the clinical thing. Like that's where they thrive, right? That's where their green light is. They're like, I really don't want to do the yellow light stuff, and the red light stuff is really a pain to work on in the practice, wrenching on my business. So that means that practice administrators and office managers need to come to these types of events, seek the type of training, and ask difficult questions from of
Right.
themselves and to their teams, and go back to their teams and try to create a culture that is healthy, that does respect the patient. Um, as an office manager and practice administrator and wearing that hat, um, do you see that in the medical community, are physicians just trying to take on that mantle of responsibility in education and training, or are they starting to say, because it's also one of those catch-22s, if that's a thing. Maybe that's showing my age and my Midwesternness. North Dakota and South Dakota, I feel you coming on. Um, uh, that, well, they, my office manager might not even be here very long, or I just recently hired him, or I just recently brought her in, and she's from, this type of practice, so she doesn't really get it, or he doesn't really understand what's happening here. But the point I'm trying to get to, and thread I want you to pull, is there needs to be more office managers and practice administrators leaning into the type of curriculum and content, asking difficult questions and seeking education and information, and maybe even going to medical association meetings more often instead of just the doctor going and getting the clinical CMEs. So what's your thoughts on that? Because you wear that hat in the practice of Campbell Family Medicine. What are you seeing that there's a gap from? And you're like, why am I not going to that?
Well, I have the luxury of being able to say that. Speaking of distractions, of being able to say that and say, look, how can you build a team and make the changes and make the shifts if only one of you is participating? Right? You can't. And it's unrealistic to think that the doctor can go to some fabulous CME event, come back, want to share all this, and the team is like deer in the headlights. So if you have more than one person who can go and you can banter the ideas, and both of you can talk about how to make those changes in the practice, right? And if you can, you invite one department head from each of your local, like bring a nursing staff person, bring your admin bookkeeper, bring your practice manager. Those things are important. Number one, they get lower fees usually, right? So there's a little bit of a thing, but it gives you the chance to take what you want to do and make it into what you can do instead of keeping it here. Because that's what happens. You go to these events and they're fantastic. You get loaded with all the stuff you want to do, and then it falls flat because you don't have support. You don't have a team member who can back you up because they weren't there. They don't get it. They don't know your enthusiasm. They didn't see the speaker. They weren't touched by that information. But if you bring them, now they can be. And if you're building a team, that old adage of there's no I in team, well, it's the truth.
But there is an ME.
Yes, there is. Yes, as there should be, right? Because it's got to start from the top down.
All right. What do you say? We're coming in for our last couple of questions. What do you say to the office manager, administrator, and or physician that would say, well, you know what? Those are all really good ideas. Like, I think that what you're teaching is awesome. And I think the questions and the answers that you gave are great. But you know what? If I can't do it for every patient, then I don't even want to try, because, but at the same time, they want to take up this argument of fairness in
Right.
healthcare and say, well, you know what? I want to be fair to everybody. Well, I'm probably the last Canadian on the planet to understand how fairness works in healthcare and to think that concierge medicine and these types of subscription-based healthcare delivery practice environments thrive because patients are very, very loyal. And we recognize that 5 words from our doctor carry a lot of weight with us. In fact, beyond my wife and kids, it's my doctor's probably the top five most influential voices in my life.
As they should be.
So if I can't do for everyone, why should I even try?
Because if you don't, you're failing. And I don't mean failing as in, deep dive bomb. I'm talking about, I use failing as an acronym, finding another interesting lesson intended to nurture and grow. That's failing, right? But you have to bring people in and you have to, this is your opportunity. If you want to make a change, it's got to start somewhere. Not doing anything isn't acceptable, right? So even if you go to these conferences and you take one teeny tiny tidbit, right? Maybe it is exactly what you taught at our forum last year and the year before. Maybe you write gratitude notes to people and just send them out randomly or to your staff. One teeny tiny step in the right direction is more than what you're making by sitting still. Don't ever sit still. Always stay in motion. So don't say you can't, because you can. And don't say you won't, because if you don't, you won't. And if you won't, you don't. But if you can and you will, then things happen, even if it's teeny tiny baby steps.
And I think it's a good, wise, I don't know what you sage piece of wisdom that says, hey, when an employee feels appreciated, they will always do more than is expected. And I think that that could be true for patients as well. If I feel appreciated by the staff at the practice and I feel appreciated and celebrated, like, Mike, you lost 5 pounds this since I last saw you last month, or we last talked, or good job on eating salads 5 times a week, for lunch.
Right.
When your doctor's celebrating that, or the team member recognizes you and calls you by your first name, I mean, how great would it be? I mean, you could literally, I considered writing an article about this. How could we put concierge medicine out of business? And you really think about it from the perspective of, okay, if we treated everybody and called them by their first name, okay, that's a good start. If we treated every patient like they were the most important person in the room every single time, that's a very good start. I mean, all of these things that's never going to happen because it's too quickly dismissed as, hey, that's a good idea, but we don't have time for that. Or the insideritis thing that says, well, you know what? We just don't do that around here. That's not how we've always done it. So what do
How's that
you,
working for you?
so what's that?
So how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
right? So what do you and your role at Revolution Practice, what do you want to be known for?
That's actually a good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that before, but I think it's to leave our legacy. And our legacy is how to change that patient experience so that everyone wins, right? So that you have a space that is not only healing, but encompasses care, gratitude, respect, loyalty, and love. Because when you have all those things growing and thriving in your practice, that's exactly what you're going to be, right? Because when you care for others that way, they care and nurture for you. And I can say that because every January, we have patients that make us home cooked gratitude meals. And they bring them into our little break room, which is a little teeny tiny room, as you've seen. And they set up the whole break room as if it were a restaurant. And it's all different, depends on which patient is bringing the lunch in. But they know how we eat. And it's their way of showing us gratitude. So here's people that are paying these premium dollars to be a membership patient, and yet they're sharing their love with us through food, right? It's these opportunities that nurture the relationship. But if you're not making the changes to start showing that, you're not going to get it back in return. So I think, like I said, you got to start somewhere, and you get what you tolerate. So if you're not in control of your schedule, if you haven't taken a vacation in 3, 5, 10 years, if you don't know your numbers, if you're not taking home the paycheck you want, it's because of you. And it's because you are getting what you tolerate. Start next week.
I heard one doctor say, even if it was $5, I gave myself a raise that
Yeah.
last year, right? Like it was I'm always shocked by how selfless so many physicians are. And actually, also how many practice administrators, office managers work so hard and are loyal to a fault, and do want the best for their patients. But man, you got to manage those emotions and those personalities. But at the
Yeah.
same time, the person sitting in the waiting room, the reception area, I don't care how much you have to do. I don't care how many phone calls, pre-authorization calls you got to make today. Like, that's not why I'm here. I don't need to know your problems. I want to be able to see my doctor or whoever I'm seeing today. I showed up early and on time, and yet we don't respect the patient enough to do that either.
You
And
have to
patients
care.
don't expect progress, like perfection. We don't. We know
No.
that the healthcare experience we're about to go into is not going to be perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. But we do expect progress. And so our final question for you is, and our guest today is Natalie Raschuti. She's with Revolution Practice. You can go to revolutionpractice.com. They have virtual training events that they do every single week at revolutionpractice.com. They also have a live event coming up this July, this summer, 2024, July 12 and 13 here in Atlanta, Georgia. You can go to revolutionpractice.com to learn more. Um, but I've found that in attending so many medical conferences over the years, and as a guest and as an attendee, that a lot of the things that I hear, they aren't like radical new ideas. Like it's just reinforcing things and best practices and ideas and concepts that actually work. And I think
Right.
that's what the purpose of events like yours are for, is saying, hey, you're probably not going to learn anything you haven't heard before, but we're going to reinforce and encourage and show you real examples of like, hey, we did this, it worked. Another practice did this and it worked. Like the umbrellas, right? Like somebody
Right.
shared from Florida, like, hey, I put umbrellas because they went to an event and they heard about it. And I was like, that's pretty cool. So revolutionpractice.com, July 12 and 13, but also just check out their virtual events. So they're not paying for this. They're not sponsoring our podcast today. I just think that uh, as as a as an editor and as a writer and an advocate for doctors, that doctors and office managers and medical teams need to know that there's organizations like Revolution Practice that are doing great things to help doctors and help patients and help their team members thrive in a very difficult healthcare culture today. So the book that you would recommend that they get, or a couple of books that maybe that you've read. We have a book reading list that we highlight every single twice a year in the summer reading list for the beach or mountains, wherever they go, or for their Christmas or holiday breaks. What's one book that's maybe on your nightstand? It doesn't have to be clinical, but maybe it's a pleasure reading book too.
I love this one. You ready? This is an oldie but goodie. So this is John Maxwell, if you're familiar with him. And he just is just this talented writer that will inspire you no matter where you are. So whether you are a clinician or a practitioner or admin staff, he talks about growth. He talks about development. He talks about, oops, I've been there. I know what you're feeling. How do you get past this? It talks about, how do you take your dreams from dreams and start implementing them. And then Michael, honestly, the books that you write I love because they really are the core of, I've been in this situation, this is my thoughts, now what do I do? And your books are really good at detailing that, as well as if you're looking to start a clinical integrative or concierge practice, your books are great for that too. But John Maxwell is kind of my go-to dude. This one is one I just picked up off of a shelf just to kind of read it to get inspired as we relaunched our Revolution practice. But that is definitely one of my heroes.
He
And then
had,
Dr. Campbell's book.
yes, I was
Can't
going to
forget
say
that.
that. Yes.
So Dr. Campbell wrote this incredible book, and it was because of her patients. Speaking of gratitude, right? They kept telling her, get it out of your brain and put it out there, because what you do is so valuable and can save lives. So Dr. Campbell wrote the Blood Pressure Blueprint, which is available on Amazon. It's actually an Amazon bestseller right now. And it is an incredible journey into the lives of patients who have been dealing with cardiac issues, stroke risks, maybe other issues, toothaches, and how those correlate to other system issues going on in the body. And it just gives you this whole new perspective. And it's not techie, it's kind of easy to read, which I love. So
Well, I would like to have, maybe that'll be our next, when she has a moment in her wonderful schedule that she is owning. She will be
right.
able to join us for a discussion to unpack that book and some of the things that the reviews and results that she's been talking about in that book, the Blood Pressure Blueprint. We'll link that in the show notes below, but we'll also put the July 12 and 13 event, as well as all the virtual events, how to learn more about the service offerings, the education and guidance that you can get from Natalie and her team over there at Revolution Practice. And you can go to revolutionpractice.com to register for their event July 12 and 13, 2024 here in Atlanta. We
Bring your
look
staff.
forward, pardon?
And bring your staff.
And bring your staff. Absolutely. I mean, your
Yes.
prices are amazing. So
Thank you.
yes, that is so important. I think that doctors shouldn't, I mean, we encourage spouses to come to our events, but I think
Right.
that more and more office managers have got to start coming out of the woodworks and fighting for a place and a seat at these conferences that these doctors are going to. But I think they also have to start looking for ideas and best practices outside of the bubble of healthcare, because healthcare it has a thick wall of resistance to new ideas, and it says, hey, that's a good idea,
Right.
but we don't have time for that inside this bubble.
Same, the same,
So
same, the same, not same, the same. And that's what we teach. Like, how do you deal with that coming in? But I'll leave you with this, Michael, is most office managers like myself, we know the value of the doc we work for, right? And the people on our team. It's you guys, it's the doctors who don't know their own value, right? They say they do, but they don't. Because if they did, they would come to events like this, right? They would bring their practice managers. We are your biggest raving fans. We see who you are. We see your brain. We see your heart. We know your passions. That's why we're here. It doesn't matter if they've been there 2 weeks, 10 years, or in my case, we're going into 20, right? It doesn't matter. It's still the fact that we believed enough to sit behind you and be your biggest cheerleader. So why not bring it in? If you want changes, we're the ones who are going to help you make them, because we want to see you succeed. We want you to be the person that you thought you could be. And maybe you've lost that person. We'll help you to get it back.
amen. All right. Well, that concludes our interview today with Natalie Raschuti, the co-founder, co-owner of Revolution Practice. She's also a woman of many talented hats over at Campbell Family Medicine. We'll put all the links to the show notes below, to the Blood Pressure Blueprint, to the Revolution Practice virtual events, the Revolution Practice live events, and everything that you are doing as well. So have a wonderful day. Thank you for being our guest today. And as always, as we say around here a lot, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It's about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. And if you're an office manager listening, that applies to you too. Let's be the best office manager for the patients and the people in the team that you serve. Thanks, Natalie, for being our guest today.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.